Hey there. Tonight's reading is from the book War Is A Racket by Smedley D. Butler, Major General, United States Marines, retired. Originally published by Round Table Press Incorporated, New York, 1935. This is a first edition book, and it went unpublished or republished for many, many years. I was lucky to find this in a secondhand shop with a little stain on the cover, and so I got it for $3, if I recall correctly, about 15 years, 20 years ago. But let me start by just reading the first few paragraphs. It's pretty good. War Is A Racket by Smedley M. Butler. Chapter 1. War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. You got to remember this was 1935 when it was published. Things have changed considerably about internationalism. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to the majority of people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few, at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge profits. In the World War, that's World War I, you must recall, World War II was yet a little bit less than a decade away. In the World War, a mere handful garnered the profits of the conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains in their income tax returns. How many other war millionaires falsified their income tax returns? No one knows. How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to go hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried the bayonet thrust of an enemy? How many of them were wounded or killed in battle? Out of war, nations acquire additional territory if they are victorious. They just take it. This newly acquired territory promptly is exploited by the few, the self-same few, who wrung dollars out of blood in the war. That war, the big war, the war to end all wars. World War I. The general public shoulders the bill. And what is that bill? This bill renders a horrible accounting. Newly placed gravestones, mangled bodies, shattered minds, broken hearts and homes, economic instability, depression and all its attendant miseries, back-breaking taxation for generations and generations. For a great many years as a soldier, I had a suspicion that war was a racket. Not until I retired to civil life did I fully realize it. Now I see the international war clouds again gathering. As they are today, I must face it and speak out. Again, they are choosing sides. France and Russia met and agreed to stand side by side. Italy and Austria hurried to make a similar agreement. Poland and Germany cast sheep's eyes at each other, forgetting for the nonce their dispute over the Polish corridor. The assassination of King Alexander of Yugoslavia complicated matters. Yugoslavia and Hungary, long bitter enemies, were almost at each other's throats. Italy was ready to jump in, but France was waiting, so was Czechoslovakia, all of them looking ahead to war. Not the many people, not those who fight and pay and die, only those who foment wars and remain safely at home profit. There are 40 million men under arms in the world today. 40 million. And our statesmen and diplomats have the temerity to say that war is not in the making. 40 million men in arms. And politicians keep saying, oh, it's peaceful. We're not getting ready for war. Hell's bells! Are these 40 million men being trained to be dancers? Not in Italy, to be sure. Premier Mussolini knows what they are being trained for. He, at least, is frank enough to speak out. Only the other day, Il Duce, an international conciliation, the publication of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said, above all, fascism, the more it considers and observes the future and the development of humanity quite apart from political considerations of the moment, believes neither in the possibility nor the utility of perpetual peace. War alone brings up to its highest tension all human energy and puts the stamp of nobility upon the peoples who have the courage to meet it. End quote. Undoubtedly, Mussolini means exactly what he says. His well-trained army, his great fleet of planes, and even his navy are ready for war, anxious for it, apparently. His recent stand at the side of Hungary in the latter's dispute with Yugoslavia showed that, and the hurried mobilization of his troops on the Austrian border after the assassination of Dollfuss showed it too. There are others in Europe, too, whose saber-rattling presages war sooner or later. Herr Hitler, with his rearming Germany and his constant demands for more and more arms, is an equal, if not a greater, menace to peace. Now remember, this is 1935. The Spanish Civil War had not yet begun. Hitler's Condor legions had not begun training on the fields of Spain, supporting the battalions and the legions of Franco, the insurgent dictator of Spain, Italy, Germany, and all these forces of oppression were beginning to rearm. It was 1935 when this book came out. War Is A Racket by Smedley Butler. Butler, with his long history as a humble yet loyal servant of the American Empire, knew full well what was up. He could read the cards, as we could say. Yet, all over, nations are camping on their arms. The mad dogs of Europe are on the loose. In the Orient, the maneuvering is more adroit. Back in 1904, when Russia and Japan fought, we kicked out our friends, the Russians, and back Japan. Then, our very generous international bankers were financing Japan. Now the trend is to poison us against Japan. Kind of reminds me of Oceania versus, what was that thing Orwell wrote? 1984, in which the enemies were our friends and our friends were our enemies every other freaking day. Let's not even think about that. After all, we're discussing a book. War Is A Racket. Where was I? What does the open door policy in China mean to us? Our trade with China is about $90 million a year, $1935. Or the Philippine Islands. We have spent about $600 million in the Philippines in 35 years, and we, our bankers, industrialists, and speculators, have private investments there of no less than $200 million. That's a lot of cash back in the day. Then to save that China trade of about $90 million, or to protect these private investments of less than $200 million in the Philippines, we would all be stirred up to hate Japan and to go to war, a war that might well cost us tens of billions of dollars. Just looking at the clock. I'm running on. I'll try to make it brief. Hundreds of thousands of American lives and many more hundreds of thousands of physically maimed and mentally men. Of course, for this loss, there would be a compensating profit. Lives for profit. Fortunes would be made. Millions and billions of dollars would be piled up by a few. Munitions makers, bankers, shipbuilders, manufacturers, meat packers, speculators, they would fare well. Yes, war is a racket. Yet, or should I say yes, they are getting ready for another war. Yes, they are. They always are. War is perpetual. Why shouldn't they? It pays high dividends. But what does it pay? What does it profit? What does it profit the masses? Me, people like you, all the peasants of our democracy, the people who do the work, the people who suffer the most, the people who make the least, but pay the most in blood. What does it profit the men who are killed? What does it profit the men who are maimed and women? What does it profit their mothers and sisters, their wives and their sweethearts? What does it profit their children? What does it profit anyone except the very few to whom war means huge profits? Yes. And what does it profit the nation? And with that, I'll leave you. There is a lot more in this little yet lengthy booklet of heavy yet chewable material. It should be read by every American. And I'll leave you with that.